proving that the school is not part of the problem. As a matter of fact, the school is part of the solution. The president made some comments yesterday and was tweeting today. President tweeted, pardon me, basically, I love New York. And then went back to his point about the vaccinations in New York. I love New York. If that's what the president thinks, then he just has an abusive personality. He has been nothing but hostile to New York from day one. Look at every action he took. It started when he passed that SALT tax. Republicans are supposed to be against redistribution of income. They took wealth from New York and they gave it to Republican states, $14 billion a year. He wouldn't repair the Hudson tunnels that he owns because he owns Amtrak that are in danger of collapsing. They've never approved the LaGuardia train. He stopped Second Avenue subway funding. First federal administration in decades that refused to fund the Second Avenue subway, which is a joint project. And then he won't fund state and local governments, which is a current issue. No stimulus package for state and local governments when we're suffering mightily. President says he created the vaccine. That is not a fact, right? There's still something called reality and truth. The federal government did not create a vaccine. Private drug companies, pharma companies are creating the vaccine. And the pharma companies internationally have worked very hard to create the vaccine because their civic duty and also their economic interest. The pharmaceutical company that develops the first vaccine is going to have a significant commodity to sell. Pfizer, a New York company, developed a vaccine that shows promise, and we are very, very excited about it. But Trump is not Pfizer. Pfizer is a company, and Trump is a member of the federal government. So he did not develop the vaccine. He has created problems for the vaccine because the vaccine is only relevant if people will take it, and we want people to take it. It's analogous to the schools. Yeah, we want to open schools, but parents have to send their children. If the school reopening plan doesn't make parents feel safe and they don't send their children, then the school reopening plan is worthless. Having a vaccine available is worthless if Americans don't trust the vaccine. Now, every major national poll has demonstrably proven that Americans believe Trump politicized the approval process. CNN poll, 45% of the respondents said they wouldn't take the vaccine. Pew Research, not part of the media, so it's not fake news, 49% said they wouldn't get vaccinated. Kaiser Family Foundation poll, 62% of respondents said they're worried that the pressure from the White House could lead the FDA to approve a vaccine before it's determined to be safe. 62%. That's the Kaiser family. ABC News poll. Headline, Americans report no confidence in Trump to confirm vaccine safety. Fewer than 1 in 10 have a great deal of confidence in Trump to confirm vaccine effectiveness. 18%, only a good amount. 69% don't have confidence in the president vouching for a vaccine. Okay? That's a shocking number. So we need to develop confidence in people to take the vaccine. How do we do that? We'll set up an independent panel of experts. Ours is headed by a Nobel Prize winner that can review FDA's approval and build confidence. New York set up such a panel. 7 other states set up such a panel because everyone sees the same problem. Connecticut, California, West Virginia, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. They all set up these independent panels to create confidence in the vaccine so people take the vaccine. That is smart, and many states did it. It will not take any additional time. It's not that these panels are going to do tests. They're just going to review what FDA did. So it's just a review on the FDA process. It will take no additional time. We are ready now to receive the vaccine. And then simultaneous with the FDA approval, our panel will be looking at it. So there's no delay. We're ready now. Send me a vaccine today. I will distribute it this afternoon. Now, I'm chairman of the National Governors Association, and I have raised questions about the vaccination process because I don't want to see this country make the same mistakes twice. And this vaccination process is going to be the hardest governmental operation we have undertaken. It is going to make the testing operation look like a little league activity compared to vaccination. And I don't want to make the same mistake we made with testing, where the federal government says, okay, states, you're in charge of testing. That was their proclamation. And you're on your own. And then the states couldn't find the reagents, and states couldn't find the nasal swabs, and states were all competing for the same companies that were producing the tests. It was mayhem and chaos and should have been coordinated by the federal government. We now, after 8 months, nationwide did 130 million COVID tests, 130 million. Vaccines, we have to do 330 million. 330 million compared to 130 million. The vaccine also has issues of trust that we didn't deal with the COVID test. The vaccine is also more invasive. It's one thing to have a Q-tip put in your nose. It's another thing to have a needle put in your arm. And some of these vaccines say they need 2 doses, cold storage. 2 doses, that's 660 million vaccinations. It is a massive undertaking. And the federal government is once again saying, the states will do it. With what resources? It's exactly what they did with testing. Except it's worse because now states have all these tremendous deficits. How am I supposed to pay for a comprehensive distribution program? And they're going to give it to the private health agencies to distribute. Yeah, but how do I get it to the black and brown community that doesn't have as many private health institutions? How do I get it into the poorer communities? Who's going to pay for that? I can't. There are also questions about how undocumented people get the vaccine, and the federal government wants information on who receives the vaccine that might very well trigger questioning their status as to whether or not they're undocumented. That'll just build more suspicion. So, yes, it's a massive undertaking. Yes, I believe the federal government is not prepared to do it. Yes, I believe they're making the same mistake they made with testing and with PPE. We leave it to the states, and then they provide no resources. Yes, I think it's worse because the states have less financial resources than we did when we started. But as far as the panel and the review, that will actually help build confidence, and people will actually have more reason to take the vaccine. And again, if they don't have confidence in the vaccine, it's all for naught. The bottom line is the president has been unhappy with New York. He was unhappy with New York the day he took office. He was unhappy that he lost New York. He was unhappy that New Yorkers criticized him. New York is home to media that criticized him, and he communicated this to me. He moved his residence to Florida, if you remember, because Florida was going to be a swing state. He thought it helped him, and because he felt he was rejected by New York. He bet a few weeks ago that he was going to win the state of New York in this past election. He lost by a huge margin. He's unhappy that the prosecutors in New York are investigating him, and there's a chance he could be indicted for tax fraud by New York prosecutors. That makes him unhappy. He was unhappy when they painted Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Plaza. That makes him unhappy. I understand that. But to the extent he says that he wants to say we haven't done what we needed to do, or he wants to be critical of our operation, that's not even consistent with what he has said or the facts. Because the facts are, remember, we had the highest number of cases because the federal government blew it, and the cases came from Europe because the federal government incompetently and negligently didn't follow the spread from China. So we had that COVID ambush. We had a tremendous number of cases, more than anyone. And we went from the highest infection rate to one of the lowest. And as we sit here today, we are still one of the lowest. And the president said, and I'll quote him, I spoke with Governor Cuomo. He's doing a great job. President said, I'm proud of the relationship my administration has forged with the state. They've been terrific to work with. President said, I thank Governor Cuomo. It was a very good job. I'm dealing with Governor Cuomo. We're dealing very well together. I spoke with Governor Cuomo. He's working really hard. We're all working hard. The relationship has been amazing. I watched what happened in California and with Governor Cuomo. I applaud him. He's taking strong, bold steps. I can say in respect to Governor Cuomo, we had a great talk. We're both doing a really good job. So that's all his words. It's all his words. But I understand he lost the election. I understand he's unhappy. And I understand that I have a job to do as governor of New York. and I'm not going to allow New Yorkers to be bullied. I'm not. I wouldn't be doing my job. And that's how this president operates. He bullies. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to protect the people of the state, and New Yorkers don't back down to bullies. Okay, questions?
As a reminder, to ask a question, you will need to press star 1 on your telephone. To withdraw your question, please press the pound key. Again, to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. To withdraw your question, please press the pound key. Again, ladies and gentlemen, to ask a question, please press star 1.
Okay, no questions. Questions going once. Questions going twice. Questions going 3 times. Melissa, do you have a question?
No. Also add in addition on the Pfizer point that Pfizer actually didn't even participate in Operation Warp Speed purposefully because I think they believed the process was being politicized, and so they actually didn't accept any federal money, which makes the president's claim that it's his vaccine even more absurd.
Oh, that's a smart point. I forgot that. The president claims credit for developing the vaccine. Pfizer develops the vaccine. Pfizer didn't even participate in Warp Speed, so he had absolutely nothing to do with it.
We have a question that comes from the line of Nick Raisman from Spectrum News. Your line is now open.
Hello, Governor. I'm well. How are you? I was wondering if there's any indication about how well compliance is going with the first day of restaurants, bars, and gyms closing at 10 p.m. How did that go last night, number one? And number two, has there been any further discussion with the governors regarding, aligning your COVID compliance policies going forward? I didn't know exactly when you were going to have that emergency summit, but was just wondering if there's anything more that's come out of that.
Yeah. The bars and restaurants at 10 o'clock, we have, as you know, Nick, my frustration has been the enforcement of the regulations, as I've mentioned many times, that the state doesn't have enough enforcement resources to police the entire state, and that's why I need the local governments to step up and do more. We have, the one exception is that we developed our own task force on bars and restaurants when the local governments weren't doing enough, and that has been doing the enforcement. They're now doing the enforcement on 10 o'clock. And that penalty is very serious because you can lose your state liquor license, and that's a very big deal. So last night, all the reports were good. In terms of the discussions with the other governors, they're going to be going on all weekend. There are discussions because there's numerous topics that we're dealing with. Part of it is looking at the information and the data. Where do we think this is going? We have the issue of airports and travel, and what can we do legally and constitutionally, and what can we enforce practically. And then we have the bars, restaurants, private homes, etc. So there's a lot, and it's We have different groups and teams, and they're working today, and they'll be working tomorrow. Next question, operator.
Next question comes from the line of Jesse McKinley from New York Times. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Governor.
My neighbor, Jesse, lives down the block.
Quick question on the idea of further restrictions. Obviously, in March, you shut down the state. There was some criticism that perhaps that came too late. Are you concerned at all with waiting too long to kind of implement sharper restrictions, considering kind of trend lines in terms of cases, hospitalizations, infection rates, etc.?
Well, if you look at the trend line, let's say, New York's trend line is the third lowest in the nation, right? If you look at trend lines, every other state should be more aggressive and faster than we are because their numbers are much worse. That's not the case. If you look at our restrictions, we're basically on par with what other states are doing, even though their numbers are much, much worse. Why? Because I want to keep our numbers as low as we can keep them while allowing the economy to function. So we've been very aggressive, especially relative to our trend line. You compare, look at we're basically where New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania are. We may be even a little more restrictive than they are. And their infection rate is double, triple, quadruple what our infection rate is. So if anything, we're erring on the side of more aggressive. And that's even abundantly clear this weekend as I'm talking to the other states, where we're already more aggressive than where they are, and their infection rate is a lot higher. But I would rather err on the side of caution. That's why even with schools, I get the 3%, and I get the parents agree to that, and that's important that we honor that agreement. But I would add a second calculus on the school testing because I think it's safer and it provides more intelligent data to make the decisions. And as we go forward, I think the numbers are going to get worse. I think the holiday season is going to be a natural accelerant. The statisticians don't factor it in. The health professionals don't factor it in. But I say to them in meetings, I think there's a human and social factor that you're not considering. I think Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving. And I think right after the day after Thanksgiving is shopping. And people go to the store. And then Christmas parties start. And office parties and Hanukkah parties, and I'll meet you for a drink for Christmas. And I think that social activity is going to increase in a way they don't predict on their charts because it's human behavior. And if those numbers go up, we stand ready to tighten the valve, to torture my metaphor that nobody likes. Melissa has a point.
No, I would just add that the difference between now and in the spring is the level of testing that we're doing and the level of contact tracing we were doing. If you remember back in March, we were blindsided by all of this. And so our positivity rate back then was 50, 60, 70% early on. And we really had absolutely no idea where it was coming from, who had it, how far it had spread, because it really, as we now know, was spreading throughout January and February throughout all of New York and the entire Northeast because of the flights coming in from Europe. So the difference between now and then is we feel like we have a much better handle on where this is happening. Our testing this week, we hit over 205,000 tests in a single day. We're continuing that upward trend. And so we have a much better handle on where this is happening. So when you look at the percentages and we're in the 2% range, 2.5% range, then we're able to keep a closer eye on it. And as the governor said, if this progresses and if this gets to a point where we can't do that anymore, then you tighten the lid.
Also, Jesse, not to irritate anyone, because you know me, I don't like to irritate anyone. But the truth is still the truth. March 1, we have our first case. We go to total close down March 18th. California has its first case like in January. They closed down like a day or two within our close down. Experts say this in March. Experts say that in March. They were all wrong. They were all wrong. It's breathtaking how wrong they were, because they all missed that it wasn't our first case on March 1st. They all missed that the virus left China in January. And the president does the China travel ban end of January. The virus was gone. January, February, March. They don't do the European travel ban until March 16th. 3 months, the virus was coming to New York, and not a single one of the experts quoted in the New York Times and the Daily News and on cable TV, yap, 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 yap. Not one of them said, you know what? The virus has to be gone from China already. You know what? It has to be in Europe, and we should stop the flights from Europe because thousands of people are coming from Europe, and they're going to have the virus. March 1, we had the first case? No, March 1, we had thousands of people in New York that none of the experts said. You go back and look at the clips. Find me anybody who says in March, I think the virus left China and it's been coming January, February, March, and New York has thousands of cases. We're all looking at California because the China virus was coming from China, because that's why it was called the China virus. It was going to California, and there was a couple of cases here, a couple of cases there. Yeah. Meanwhile, what nobody told us was it was coming from Europe to the East Coast and to Chicago. That's the criticism in the retrospective. Closed down March 1 to March 18? Forget it. It was over on March 1. You should have closed Europe down in January. That's what you should have closed down, because it wasn't sitting in China. It's still amazing to me that with all these experts, after SARS, after MERS, go look at that movie Contagion 2011. The Hollywood writers predicted it, but our health officials didn't see it. You thought that there was going to be a virus in China in December and it was still going to be there in January, February, March? Why, the virus doesn't get on a plane? Incredible to me, frankly. But now we're not where we were in March. We have data and data and data. And that's why we've been so obsessive with the data. The only variable now is personal behavior. And that's what I mentioned before with the holidays and how responsible do you think people will be? And how reckless do you think people will be? And that's a personal judgment. But again, you're going to see that in the numbers. And I have my hand on the valve. Look, we already are getting criticized that I'm too aggressive, right? You have officials, you have sheriffs and local governments saying they're not going to enforce my rules because they think they're too aggressive. Last question, operator.
Last question comes from the line of Stacy Sherman from Bloomberg. Your line is now
Hi,
open.
Governor.
Hey, Stacy.
Hi there. Can you tell me, I just want to get back to New York City schools. Have you spoken to the mayor about your concerns? And also, do you have the authority to order him to keep the schools open?
Yes, I have the authority to order him to keep the schools open. To me, the school decisions, we have 700 school districts. The state set parameters on that the local school districts have to be within. The city's plan is within those parameters. But more than that, Stacy, I was insistent that the cities and the school districts develop a plan in concert with the teachers and the students. It was very important to me that the parents were part of the plan. And I had them set up websites and conference calls and webinars to make the parents part of the plan. The 3% was the product of that parental dialogue and teacher dialogue. That's what they agreed to in New York City, the whole New York City community. The mayor didn't do this by fiat. He didn't say 3%. It was a product of the collective discussion. I'm now saying to the collective, I know you all agreed to this. And you all had webinars and discussions, and by the way, thousands of parents participated. But something's changed in the interim. And with COVID, facts change. And when facts change, then maybe conclusions should change. We now are testing in schools also, which we weren't when we first had this conversation. Why not add a factor of the school infection rate that you consider also in making the decision of whether or not the schools are open? So, okay, 3% for the jurisdiction. But if a school is under 1%, and you now know that because you can test the school, wouldn't you rather have the student in the 1% school than on the 3% street? Do you know what I'm saying? But it still has to be a collective decision, because if you don't have the parents agree, they're not going to send the students. And that's the analogy for the vaccine. If people don't trust it, they're not going to take it. So I don't care what you say to them. They're not putting a needle in their arm if they don't trust it. And all the polls say they don't trust it. And that's why states have done independent panels. I don't care what school plan you come up with. If parents don't trust it, they're not sending their child. So it has to be a collective decision. But I would suggest that they have this discussion. Add a second factor of the school infection rate. That is my suggestion. And I hope they do discuss it. And if the parents support it and the parents will send their children, again, there's a lot of downsides to closing schools. The teachers also have to accept it, because a classroom with students and without teachers, that doesn't do a heck of a lot of good either. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Have a good day.
This concludes today's